this one really affect my mental state of being. This definitely completely broke me while putting me together and breaking me apart again. Hello my lovelies, welcome back. My name is Vidi for those of you who are new here. I'm working with very little light. We have been having a bit of a storm this whole week. I just decided we have to record this video because it's already going to be uploaded a bit later than I would have wanted, and to make matters worse, I'm also getting a bit of a sore throat. But getting off topic, as you all saw or read in the title, we are going to be doing our October wrap-up. I had mentioned that I wanted to try quarterly wrap-ups, but I decided for this holiday kind of season to just do it monthly because I have been reading books that go more along with the holidays. We're gonna focus on monthly reviews for now and then maybe pick up quarterly again. So grab a drink, get cozy, and let's get started with these reviews. I made myself a nice coffee. So in total this month, I read 9 books. Most of them were physical and I read a few in my Kindle. Starting off with our first book, Vampires of el Norte, Vampiros en el Norte by Isabel Cañas, translated by, who did I say it was translated by? This is translated by Hugo Lopez Araiza Bravo. This was originally written in English and now there's a plane passing by. Hold on. Give it a second. This was originally written in English, but I am trying to practice my Spanish and I'm trying to consume more things in Spanish, and that includes reading. I did buy this book in Spanish. This book is a historical fiction with some horror elements and a romance subplot or a romance plot. It's a bit of a historical romance, but this is not really a horror book. It just has horror elements. This for me was a 5, a very solid 5. So just to give a little bit of a summary, the story starts off with Nena and Nestor as children who are best friends. Nena is the daughter of the head rancher, the boss, and Nestor is the son of one of the workers of the ranch. One night, they're looking for this treasure when out of nowhere, Nena gets attacked. When Nestor finds Nena, she basically looks dead and takes her back to her house, only for Nena's family to declare that she's dead. Nestor, scared and heartbroken, runs away. A few years later, is requested by Nena's brother to come back to help the ranch because there are what they refer as Anglos, basically trying to take away their land. He goes back only to find out that Nena actually has been alive this whole time. So that's kind of like the gist of the story. Nena thinks that Nestor just left her and Nestor this whole time thought she was dead. That's where the romance plot comes from, while still having a lot of like historical background because this is during the 1940s. So a lot of the Mexican border states are feeling some kind of resentment because the Mexican politicians just basically allowed their land to get taken, and now there's this uncertainty between the regular Mexican citizen folk of what's going to happen to our land, what's going to happen to everything we worked for. Is it going to get taken away? This is ours. So it definitely touches a lot on the ramifications of political actions between leaders and how the regular folk have to face it and what happens to them. They're kind of in this limbo part. Alongside with the disparity between the head ranchers and the working folk, feeling kind of stuck and feeling enslaved to these bosses. So there is also a commentary on that section between the high class and working class. To add more elements to this book, you have the horror elements, the vampire elements, more of a horrifying creature. Definitely there are some horror elements in there. I also really did appreciate the romance part. It was very frustrating, but it's a slow burn, so it makes sense. And I also understand the anger and frustration on both ends. And it is a little bit spicy, not like vulgar or descriptive spicy, but it is not a clean romance. So for spice, I would like to give it a 1.5. And overall, I just really enjoyed it. Like I said, the vampires, horrifying, but very, very symbolic in the story. I think it's a really good book. I definitely would recommend reading it. And this was a 5-star for me. So starting off the month strong, moving on to our next book. Thought the candle would be a nice ambiance, but now I'm not sure if this is a good idea. So the next book that I picked up, The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This is my first Riley Sager book. This was an absolute masterpiece as well. Another 5-star for me. I read a lot of good books. I read a lot of good books. A quick summary. This is a thriller with some like paranormal elements, very, very atmospheric, a creepy mansion. Since this is a bit more of a thriller, I'm going to give a very vague summary. The story follows Kit, whose life just has fully fallen apart, who is given one last job opportunity to kind of get her life together. She is assigned to this one infamous person named Lenora, and Lenora is basically believed to have killed her family. So that's just like a quick short summary. The writing definitely could not put it down. There was a lot of details that you really did have to pay attention to, because it was the most insignificant details that if you just kind of like read over, you would kind of like look back and be like,
oh, so that's why they say that.
And there were times where I'm just like, I would pick up on those. I'm like, wait a minute. And it would pique my interest, right? It really did feel like I was solving the mystery alongside with this person. I really did enjoy that part of it all. It really did take me through a journey. I did find it a little bit predictable at times, but there were other times where it completely took me by surprise. Like genuinely, there were times I just didn't see certain things coming. This thriller is not super dark. It still has very like eerie elements. Like I said, it's very atmospheric. The mansion itself is just all vibes, if I'm being honest. Like it's exactly what I was looking for during that moment. I think overall I just really enjoyed my experience reading this book. I felt a lot of emotions with this book, and it had a very interesting and satisfying ending for sure. For October, I only had one book club book because the other book club was reading a book I had already read, so I opted out of it. This book club book was for my in-person book club, and that is Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. I've mentioned it multiple times, but we can mention it again. This is a dark sapphic romance that inspired Dracula. So this for me was a 4 stars. It was spicy without it being spicy, so I'm not going to give it a spice rating. So just a quick summary for Carmilla. The story follows Laura, who is a noble girl living in this castle with her dad and obviously like servants and stuff like that, but she doesn't have any companions. She doesn't have any friends because there's no one in her station around her age that lives nearby. One day while she's out on a walk with her father, this carriage tips over, and 2 women were in that carriage. One of them was an older lady who was saying that she really needs to get to a certain location as soon as possible. The older lady is worried that her daughter, who was also in the carriage, might not be up for the journey. Laura asks her dad, hey, can we take care of this other girl? She can be my companion. And so the father agrees, and that is how Carmilla comes into Laura's life. This is a story between Laura and Carmilla and the oddities of Carmilla. For a classic, this was actually really easy to read for me personally. This is something we did discuss in our book club, how some classics are really easy to get into and some are not. This one, I felt like it was pretty straightforward for me. It has the kind of narration where you're being told what's happening while still being very atmospheric. And I think the only downside of this, and it's possibly because of how it was published, is that each chapter feels very cut, so it doesn't flow as naturally as a book normally would. But from my understanding, these were released like in magazines, like chapter by chapter or something like that, so that makes sense as to why it doesn't flow as well as a usual novel would. As I mentioned, this was very sensual, very spicy, but it was not spicy, it was not explicit. It was more about, oh my god, I felt this certain kind of way, I had these kind of feelings. So it definitely explored women's sexuality. I was contemplating on giving it a spice rating, but nothing happened. Maybe like a kiss on the cheek, but that was about it, right? It was again more about the sensation, the feeling of it all, and exploring women's sexuality. Definitely spicy without it being spicy. So I'm not going to give it a spice rating, just know that it does have that very sensual feel. I could definitely see how this book inspired a lot of the vampire culture with the sensuality and the darkness and all of that stuff. Even though touching on all of those topics, I will say, just like with a lot of classics written during its time, unless it's known to be a very progressive form of literature for its time, this did not necessarily feel like that. In my personal opinion, there is a lot of homophobic underlying tones, mostly about warning women about other women companions and the dangers of women's sexuality and stuff like that. So it did feel like it had that note, but again, knowing when it was written, I feel like you kind of expect that. I guess don't be surprised if you see a little bit of those underlying tones, because they aren't hard to miss, especially towards the end. You're kind of like, oh yeah. I really did like it, it very quick and easy read and very fun to discuss with my book club. So the book that I picked up after that was actually a Kindle read. This was part of my TBR jar pick, and that was Forbidden Game by Madison Fox. This is a 3.5 out of 5 for me, and I will give it a spice rating of 3. So just a quick summary, this is the second book in a interconnected series. It could still be read as a standalone. This story follows Parker, who is a masked gamer and a multi-billionaire, and Sydney, who is the publicist of the System, which is the gaming group that Parker is from. The System consists of 3 different masked gamers. So this follows Parker, the guy with the blue mask. And then Sydney and Parker actually had some history before Sydney started working for the System. That's kind of where the story picks up. It's a bit of a forbidden relationship because she works for them. I wasn't expecting too much from this book. This was a palate cleanser for me. I needed a little bit of a break from the kind of books that I was reading, and I needed something easy and consumable. And this gave me that. It was funny, it was short, it was sweet. Well, I don't know about short, but it was funny and it was sweet. I really did enjoy myself. We had masks, so that kind of still fit with the Halloween theme. It was fun. I mean, I don't have much else to describe it as fun. I did really enjoy the side characters. So you do get to see the first couple, Alex and I always forget her name, Stevie. There are a lot of Alex and Stevie cameos, and I really do enjoy the bromance between the 3 gamers. It's just really fun seeing them interact with each other and stuff like that. So it's just a nice, cute palette cleanser. There's not really much to say. We're gonna give my camera a break because it's overheating. We'll be right back. I'm back with my pups. He might stay, he might not. So the next book that we read is The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Okay, for the last 3 books, I made a reading vlog if y'all want to see a little bit more of my reactions, especially for this one. Hi. Because boy, did this one really affect my mental state of being. This is a 4 out of 5, and it does have some spicy scenes, so I did give it a 2 for spice. So this story follows 3 different timelines, right? We have one in 1908 that is set in Mexico, and it follows Alba, who's reeling from tragedy and basically feels like her family is bewitched. And she's just trying to save her family, save her ranch. And then we follow the next timeline in 1934, which is set in Massachusetts and follows Beatrice. Beatrice is a student who eventually becomes a novelist and is telling her story of what happened during the disappearance of one of her friends. I'm sorry if he's distracting. And then our last timeline is in 1998, set in Massachusetts, and it follows Minerva, who's the granddaughter of Alba and is doing her thesis on Beatrice's stories and stumbles upon the disappearance. I love you too, but you're so distracting. Okay, where was I? Oh, get it together. The 1998 timeline is set in Massachusetts and follows Minerva, who's the granddaughter of Alba and is doing her thesis on Beatrice and is starting to find eerie similarities between the two. That's kind of the gist of the story. I don't want to reveal too much because it's a little bit of a thriller, a lot of horror elements for sure. Very, very horrifying stuff that does happen. Very disturbing things that happen in this book. I do want to say I enjoyed the majority of the story. I really liked it, and this was going to be a bit of a higher rating. I will quickly talk about why it ended up being a 4 and not a 4.5. And that's because of Alba's storyline. It's very apparent from the second chapter, which is the introduction of Alba's storyline, that there is a very inappropriate relationship in the story. So right off the bat, just for that alone, I would suggest to look up any trigger list if that is something that this book has, because that's something that I did not know going in, and I thought, maybe it won't take it there. It took it there. That's definitely one of the reasons why I didn't enjoy the book as much as I originally was, but I definitely understand the gravity of the relationship and how horrifying it was. I basically understand the point they were trying to make. All of that aside, I did really enjoy the rest of the story. I think my favorite timeline was Beatrice's timeline because the thriller was definitely focused in that timeline since it did focus on the disappearance of a student. Minerva's timeline was very interesting, seeing the two worlds collide. I think one of my favorite things about this book, cross-cultural references between witches, and yes, they did reference a white witch, you know, someone that does maybe spells or magic unknowingly without any negative intentions. But then you had the very horrifying aspects of witches. And there were some very, very creepy scenes in this book for sure. Nothing that really terrified me, but things that definitely made me think twice. I felt like there was a point where all of the stories, we were at a climax and I could not put it down because I needed to know what happened next. And everything that happened next was just like,
what did I read?
Because it all just happened at once. I think overall, good story. 4 stars. Could have been a little bit higher, but you know, it's okay. I feel a little bit all over the place. Less prepared for this. So the book that I read after that, I actually did not have on my October TBR, but I did want to read it during October because it was the perfect spooky time to read it. And the only reason I read it was because Libby came through and I got both the audiobook and the Kindle book at the same time. So I did do a mixture of listening and reading. I ended up reading The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. So this is a horror book. It definitely is supposed to be a psychological horror. A quick summary so I don't spoil too much of what's going on. This story follows Jiwoon, whose dad basically walked out on his family, and now Jiwoon and her mom and her sister are trying to learn how to live without their dad until one day the mom comes home with a new boyfriend. So that's all I'm going to say about the book. Like I said, this is a psychological horror. You could see Jiwoon slowly start to spiral into obsession and paranoia and becomes very manic. It's a very, very interesting story. I feel like it touches a lot on Korean culture and fetishizing Asian people. Definitely, like I mentioned, has a lot of social commentary. I feel like it was a very quick read. Very disturbing. Very, very disturbing at parts. Was it scary? No. Was it very satisfying? Yes. Like, you go, girl. There were moments when I was just like,
oh my god, that's kind of gross.
Definitely would recommend if you're into horror books, psychological horror. If you're into social commentary books, another good one. Also, just in case I forgot to say, I rated this a 4 out of 5. The book that I read after that was Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. First of all, I just want to say, love the book. Hate this version. Like, it's literally peeling and I hate that. I hate it so much. I will get another copy because I don't like this copy. This is the second book in the Voice of Tommen series. This is part 2 of Johnny and Shannon's relationship. So this does pick up where book 1 left off. I'm not going to talk too much about what it's about because it would spoil what the first book is about. Just know that Johnny and Shannon are trying to navigate being together now. I will say this couple has a chokehold on me. I want to protect Johnny and Shannon so much. I feel like this book was really good showing their character development. Shannon learning to be a teenager, learning to do what she wants to do rather than what others want her to do. I love seeing Johnny realizing that he has to take moments to also be a teenager and not have to grow up so fast. I think the character development in this was just beautiful. It was really good. Very, very emotional story. Like, I think the only critique that I have was that it felt really long after the climax. It's a very big book, and I think after everything that happened, I was just kind of like,
okay, this could get wrapped up now.
So it did feel a little bit long, but I do appreciate taking the time to set up the other storylines that we will be seeing in the next few books. I'm so sorry. I'm such a mess in this video. Okay, I'll do my best to like make this cohesive. As I was saying, as for Spice, I don't necessarily feel like this was age appropriate. It is supposed to be a young adult book. I feel like leading up to it, it made sense. Teenagers exploring their sexuality and stuff like that. But there was a point where I'm just like,
these are still teenagers and I don't really want to be reading about that.
And it got a little bit too spicy in my opinion for a young adult book. But at the end of the day, I'm not a parent. I don't know what's too much unless I have children and then I get to decide what's too much. That's not the case right now, so I'm not going to be the judge of that. Do know that this is not a closed door romance. This is not a clean romance. There is spice. So I will be honest and say it's 2 out of 5 because it was a little bit explicit and then there were more fade to black moments after that. But again, if we're approaching it like the sex education route, the Netflix show, it's more kind of like on that level of spiciness. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the series so far. I'm gonna take a break between I jump into the third book because it's Joy's story and I feel like we're going to go back into the really dysfunctional family that is the Lynch family, and I need a moment, I need a breather, because it's gonna be hard to read Joy's story now. So the book that I read after that is none other than Alchemized by Senlin Yu. I made a whole reading vlog with spoilers if you all want to go check that out. This is going to be a very summarized version of what I said in that reading vlog. So if you want more details, more of my actual in-depth thoughts, I would definitely recommend that video. This is a hefty book, another one of those hefty books, 1,000 pages. It's very heavy, so I'm going to like put it down while we talk about this. Right off the bat, I will tell you all that was a 5 for me. Again, I might be giving into the hype, but I really enjoyed that book. It is going to be one of my top books of the year, hands down. Really enjoyed it. This is a dark fantasy, emphasis on dark. Please check trigger warnings because this is not a book for everyone. So just a quick summary. This story follows Helena, who was in stasis for over a year and was supposed to be dead but somehow was still alive, trapped away in her mind, only to be woken up and finding out that the rebellion that she was in lost, and Moro and the Undying took over, and everything she fought for has fallen. So she is now currently a prisoner of war and cannot remember anything leading up to her being in stasis. So the Undying feel like she has some hidden secrets locked away in her mind and are trying to break her mind open to get those secrets. Secrets that Helena can't even remember herself. That's kind of the gist of the story. Very much simplifying everything, but that's because there's so much to talk about. It is a bit of a fantasy sci-fi book. It is a very complex world. Because the world is extremely complex, I feel like the first few chapters of the book focuses a lot on world building, so it does have a bit of a slower build up for that reason, because you are thrust into the middle of it all. It is post-war. Our protagonist has been captured and they're trying to break her. You're trying to play a lot of catch up, trying to understand the world for that reason. And then throughout the rest of the story, you're thrown more information about the world, how they got there, what's going on and stuff like that. While this is a very hefty book, it is thankfully a standalone, so there is only one book that you have to read and it does wrap it all up. I feel like since it is very complex when it comes to world building and the magical system, it could be a little bit off-putting for people who don't usually read fantasy, so I wouldn't call it a beginner book, but I also wouldn't say don't read it if you've never read fantasy. It's just going to take a little bit more time if that's not something that you're used to. I feel like the mistake that a lot of people do is calling this book a romantasy. For that reason, you go in thinking this is a romance book. It does such an injustice calling it just a romance because it is so heavy on political views. There's a lot of philosophical topics. It goes in about religion. There's just a lot more than just a romance. And yes, towards the middle end, you do see a lot of that slow burn romance that you were expecting, but there's so much more that you can take away from the book. It is not just a romance book. I would call this a fantasy with maybe a romance subplot. This just talks a lot about the grief and aftermath of war and how other people who are not basically fighting in the front lines perceive it. I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling it. There's a lot of things I want to touch on, but just know it's a good book. It's not just a romance book. It's very long. Take your breaks. Look up trigger warnings. It's a standalone. And this definitely completely broke me while putting me together and breaking me apart again. Really liked it. And it's one of those books that I'm going to continuously talk about and recommend to my friends. Overall, really good book. 5 out of 5 book. Loved it. As for spice, it did have some spicy scenes, but again, nothing extremely explicit or anything like that. It was more about the feeling. So I am going to say a 1.5 out of 5 because I do not want y'all to go in thinking it's a clean romance when it's not. But yeah, Alchemized. Let me give my camera one last break and then we'll finish our wrap up. Okay, my throat's about to give out. Let's just finish this wrap up and hope for the best. So the final book that I read for October was on my Kindle and I needed something fluffy and easy to consume. I picked up the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This was not on my October TBR, but it was one of the books I wanted to get to this spooky season if I had the time. So this is a cute seasonal romance. This has those witchy vibes. I did end up rating this book a 3 out of 5. And as for spice, a 2.5 out of 5. This book follows Vivian, a witch who had a little too much to drink after a breakup and accidentally ends up cursing her ex, only for 9 years later, Reese, her ex, to come back and everything kind of just going sideways. So as I mentioned, this was cute and fluffy and everything I wanted. Wow, I didn't put on my earrings. And everything I wanted for this season, especially after reading such a heavy book. I needed something easy to consume. I'm not going to lie, I was expecting a little bit more from the book because so many people rave about this book and it's like people's go-to when recommending books for this season. It just felt like another romance book, but make it seasonal, make it witchy, make it Halloween. There wasn't too much that really called out to me. Yeah, there wasn't too much that really called out to me. I'm trying to think back to like what exactly I liked about it. I liked that it was a good palate cleanser. I liked that it cheered me up. I liked that it had Halloween vibes. But other than that, it wasn't extremely memorable for me. It was really cute. It was spicy. It was fun. I enjoyed myself and I had a good time. So we're just gonna leave it at that. But yeah, that's kind of it. I had a lot of good books this month. I think it was 1, 2, 3, 5 stars, and most of the other ones were between 3 and 4s. Very, very good books this month. I had a lot of fun reading these books. I did read a lot of dark books, so I definitely do need a break from dark books and focus on lighter topics. I'm sorry if this video is all over the place. I'm feeling a little bit more sick as I continue filming and I kind of just want to wrap this video up now at this point. I'm sorry if my reviews have less substance. I feel like my brain got a little bit foggy and I couldn't focus on points as much, more just on how I felt. That's what we're gonna say. But that's enough talking. Let me know down in the comments below what was your favorite read for October. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already and you would like to, please subscribe. I usually make book content and now and then I make some lifestyle vlogs. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a beautiful day and I will see y'all next time. Bye.